31 Days of Horror with Mark.
Hello, and welcome to 31 Days of Horror with me, Mark and this guy. Hello. As you can no doubt guess by the prop, I'm going to talk about the Alien franchise, not Alien versus Predator, because I refuse. Even I have my limits, and there's just no danger. I'll rewatch them because they're garbage, and the less said about them, the better. But no. So yesterday and combination of today, I watched these four yesterday, which includes Alien, Aliens, Alien 3, Alien Resurrection. I then watched Prometheus today and Alien Covenant this afternoon as well. So yes, so I'm going to have a wee chat about them by myself, a lonely chat. But yeah, so as always, I like to kind of start these but with the whole if you've never seen them before, which I think is very unlikely at the moment, but who am I to kind of judge? So Alien films, so the first one was released in 1979, directed by Ridley Scott. Second was 86, James Cameron. 92 for Alien 3 with David Fincher directing, and then Alien Resurrection was directed by Jean-Pierre Jeunet, and that was in 97. And then Prometheus was 2012, and I think Covenant was 2018, 2019. Not too sure off the top of my head, but yeah. So the original kind of film is purely horror based. I don't care what you say, Ant, you're wrong, mate. Like, I actually had a guy, a friend of mine, trying to kind of convince me that he thought that the first Alien film was now a horror film. Come on, Ant, seriously. This fucked up thing attacks somebody and lays an egg and then bursts out of the boy and there's a creature stalking. Yeah, okay. Oh, incidentally, spoiler alert, but apologies if I'm kind of saying stuff that you've never really heard. So yeah, first film, effectively the haunted house in space with like a horrible creature, and then like second one's the only one that really kind of delves into a different kind of genre, and then the other ones try to keep as close to horror as possible. But the first two are fairly kind of different, which is a good thing. I know some folks that didn't kind of that think that the second one isn't as good and so on and so forth. I'd probably kind of say if I'm rating them, it would be the first two, and then the others are in a almost like kind of hodgepodge kind of thing. I like Alien 3, I like Alien Resurrection, unlike some people, and I actually like the prequels, although I firmly believe that they weren't necessary. Anyway, so I'm getting down to it. In the original, it is a refinery crew who have essentially kind of acquired a bunch of ore, and they're on their way back home, and then they get awakened early to go and check out a distress call, which tends to be almost the theme of this. Oh, there's a weird distress call, let's go and check out, whereby they really shouldn't. But in this, the reason for them having to check out is because if they didn't, they basically forfeit their wages. So they're just like, right, okay, fair enough, we'll have to kind of go and check. You know, I like how the kind of common decency kind of like is swept to the side in order to allow the essentially the protagonist to basically kind of go, yeah, we'll totally help them for the money. I think there's maybe kind of a few crew members that are like, yes, we have to do our solemn duty, and then there's a couple that are just like, yeah, we're in it for the cash. Excuse me, sorry. So they land on the planet, they find that there's a signal, they go check out the kind of the source of the signal, and it's an alien kind of ship which they've never seen before. And as they're kind of checking it out, there's all this really cool imagery, essentially created by the late great H.R. Geiger. Wasn't it for everybody? I kind of totally get that. Some of his kind of stuff is a bit kind of out there, but his design work on Alien, and effectively he's essentially credited for every single one of them because of the alien design and everything. But like I think he was responsible for the face hugger. Some of the earliest concept art for the face hugger was properly fucking creepy. Not that the final creature isn't creepy. I mean, look at this thing. But yeah, and so they find out that ship's derelict, and they're just like, all right, okay. And then the distress signal turns out that it's not a distress signal at all. It's a stay the fuck away from the ship because there's shit here. And of course they're too late to kind of figure that out. And then they come across so Kane, played by John Hurt, finds like a shitload of eggs. It's like, what the hell is this? And this was like back in '79. I think this was like fairly kind of groundbreaking and everything in terms of the kind of like the horror genre and everything. I think it's really kind of interesting when you kind of read a lot about this and how it went through all the different stages and everything, and how it was effectively originally called Star Beast, and some of the kind of stuff that kind of happened in everything and was kind of essentially shelved for the better was quite good. But then Kane looks in, egg opens up, and he's like, oh, what's this? Rather than going, nope, which any kind of, well, I mean, especially now, but any normal person would look in that egg with the egg opening going, nope, I'm not going near that. Pull me back up, please. There we go, right into the film kind of thing. But no, he has a wee look in, and and it's not just giving him a hug. I love the fact this is called a face hugger. Oh, cute. But no, it's not just giving him a loving hug and a wee, oh, I love you. It's getting it on, and it leaves a little present with Kane kind of thing. So, look at the kind of elements prior to kind of the birthings. Really, like, I love the atmosphere and everything. So there is dissension in the ranks. So effectively, the senior officer in charge basically turns around and goes, "We can't let anything on board because, you know, quarantine and all the rest of it." And like, the captain's like, what the hell, let us in kind of thing. And she's like, nah, no happening. And then the science officer effectively overrules her, played by Ian Holm. And she's kind of raging a bit. And with good fucking reason as well. So they bring Kane on, and they're like, right, okay, we need to get this thing off him kind of thing. So the first time you ever see the facehugger, they cut off the helmet, and there it is kind of hugging his face, hence the name. And so they're just like, shit, we need to try and kind of do something. And as soon as they start to kind of try and mess with it, like the fingers that are essentially stuck onto his head, that kind of thing, it starts to kind of like effectively strangle him. Basically kind of, if you touch me, I'm going to kill this boy. And they probably should have just let him kill him, but they didn't. And so it then goes, right, okay, we're going to cut this thing off because... like, we kind of leave him like this. That's kind of fucked up. And so they try and cut off. And then they discover that it's got a wonderful defense mechanism. You don't dare kill it because it's got acid for blood, which is really cool. It kind of eats through the hull. And obviously, it being a space film, they can't really afford to kind of be letting shit melt through the hull into space. So they can't breathe and they die and what have you. So they're just like, fuck. So they end up just leaving it. Thing then kind of eventually drops off and dies of its own volition, and John Hurt seems fine. He's like, oh, that's cool, everything's cool and everything. I think John Hurt, I don't know how big a name he was back then, but like he is kind of, I think, fairly highly credited in the film. And so yeah, then there's basically the fairly famous scene. They're all sitting there having kind of breakfast after Kane wakes up, and they're like, oh, he's cool, let's just have something to eat. And then we get the birthing scene, which is fairly iconic. John Hurt goes into some fairly uncomfortable looking spasms, goes apeshit, and then we get our little kind of friend, the chestburster, which is the next kind of stage of the actual kind of alien creature, popping out going, hiya, tiny wee thing at the time. People are just, what the fuck? And then it kind of launches off across the kind of table, and then they're basically within... they're in the mission to effectively kind of find it, capture it, so they can like effectively blow it into space. Bet you wish they'd basically followed quarantine protocol, but they didn't. So yeah. So then the rest of the kind of film essentially follows the crew members as they try and kind of capture it. At first they're thinking it's the size of a cat, so it's like whatever kind of thing. But by the time they catch up with it, it's pretty much 8 foot tall and pissed off. So anybody that comes across it is essentially met with a fairly kind of grisly end, at least according to the original theatrical cut, which I kind of prefer over the director's cut that came out in 2003, because it's a lot less ambiguous. I think the decision to essentially expand upon the alien myth in the second one made a lot more sense, but in this first one, as far as I'm concerned, because I grew up watching the theatrical cut, the alien itself is just trying to defend itself. Because if you think about it this way, Yvonne kind of thought this was quite funny, but I'm in fairly high defense of the alien in the first one, because if you think about this, he's taken Faye's kind of surroundings onto a place that he doesn't kind of know, and he's like, what the hell's going on? Well, like, I don't know if it's androgynous or it's like asexual or whatever. I mean, it doesn't kind of reproduce itself, but anyway, so we'll call it he or they or she or them. So the alien it wakes up, it's pissed off, it's like, what the hell's going on here? I didn't sign up for this. So when they try and capture it, or like hurt it or whatever, it's just defending itself. Like, it's literally defending itself to the point whereby eventually kind of like gets brave and starts kind of like going after the crew itself. But at first, it's just like, leave me the fuck alone. Like, I didn't ask for this. And so, I mean, as I say, it's fairly high defense of the alien in the first one. I think it's really kind of shite that they're winding the poor alien up. But yeah, so they do wind him up, and of course he gets really kind of pissed off a bit, which is fine. So that point on, each of the kind of crew members is picked off. You get Brett Gone First, played by Harry Dean Stanton. Rest in peace, sir. You then get Dallas, played by Tom Skerritt. So I mean, the original cast is pretty kind of like big, and as they kind of whittle down, and eventually Ripley ends up in charge. Ripley, played by Sigourney Weaver, who, as I'm sure you kind of guys ended up, as you know, ended up being effectively the face of the franchise for at least the first 4 films. Everybody was very much aware of Ellen Ripley and what have you. So she ends up in charge. She then kind of goes to kind of, like, with the main computer going, what the hell's going on? And then the computer's just like, yeah, we need this kind of alien, so we didn't really care what happens to you people, what have you. And this kind of leads her to find out that the science officer, Ash, played by the late great Ian Holm as well, is not exactly what it kind of seems. And I think one of the most disturbing kind of moments in the actual film, like, you've got an alien running about kind of like using its second move to kind of like make kind of air holes that weren't actually there beforehand. And I think probably the most unsettling scene is when Ian Holm loses his shit and tries to kind of kill Ripley and everything. It's pretty uncomfortable to watch. And as it kind of progresses, they whittle down, and then Ellen, or Ripley, as she's obviously kind of more commonly known, is like the last survivor, thinks she's actually alright. Turns out the alien's actually on the escape pod with her, shock her, and then you end up with the kind of almost effective ending to most of the kind of films, where she blows the fucker out the airlock. She effectively wraps herself in a spacesuit, clamps herself down into a chair, like knocks out its kind of hiding place in it and what have you, and then opens the front door effectively and tells it to get out. She launches a grappling hook into it, fires it into space, and then bye alien, see you later kind of thing. I think it was really kind of interesting, and I'm kind of glad that they glossed over this, but apparently in the original ending, like, she wasn't supposed to kind of make it, and the alien was going to kill her and essentially use her voice, I think, to kind of like do a distress call or some shit like that. I'm really glad they kind of they actually left that out. I think that was in the original kind of script. It's really kind of interesting when you kind of hear about all that kind of stuff that kind of got left on the cutting room floor, and you're just like, oh, thank fuck. Things like, for example, Tom Selleck being was apparently the original kind of person for Indiana Jones, and you're just like, what? No, what? But there is a parallel universe out there whereby that actually happened, and you're just like, no, weird. Anywho, and so the next, so it then leads into the next film, which is the only genre swap. And as far as I'm concerned, in the original first 4 films, the only film I actually think that the director's cut, or as they call it in this, the special edition. James Cameron doesn't tend to like to kind of call them director's cuts, as far as I know, because I think the special edition of Terminator 2 as well is also called like the T1000 edition or some shit like that. He doesn't actually like to kind of call it a director's cut. But I think the original is maybe about 2 hours, I think, and maybe some change, and then like this is like almost 3. It's like 2 hours and 37 minutes. But it doesn't seem very kind of bad. It's not badly paced. It gives us a lot more exposition, a lot more background on some of the characters in this one. So when this one kicks off, it kicks off with like Ripley's ship adrift in space. One of the best continuity kind of bits of all time. The grappling hook where she uses to kind of fire the alien out in the first film is actually still lodged in the door if you actually kind of watch the opening scene, which I only kind of found out about this a few years back, but you can actually see the grappling hook still stuck in the door, which is just like, nice, well done, guys. And so, yeah, so she's adrift in space, she gets rescued, turns out that she's actually been kind of like snoozing for 57 kind of years, as opposed to the few weeks that she thought she would get picked up by. So that's obviously like a blow right out the kind of gate. You're just like, whoa. And it turns out that she actually kind of had a family, specifically a daughter, who unfortunately kind of passed away prior to Ripley kind of actually kind of getting back. So she's almost immediately like kind of essentially kind of broken because of that kind of thing. I mean, even more so because of all the shit. And then she essentially gets all the big wigs and the kind of bureaucrats and everything kind of like going, why did you blow up the ship? She's like, I blew up the ship, and I done that because there was a fuck off alien on there trying to kill us kind of thing. What the hell? And they're just like, was there though? And she's like, no, there wasn't. No, I don't know. Like, this paperwork here says that didn't happen. So she's understandably pissed off with that as well. So then she gets she ends up kind of like dropped into cargo docks or whatever, just kind of trying to make ends meet. Funnily enough, back on the alien planet, which in the special edition you actually get to see, because I think in the theatrical cut it pretty much jumps for that to a scene a wee bit later on, whereby she is actually at home. You don't get to see anything on the colony planet LV-426, which is where they kind of found the kind of creature in the kind of first one. But in the special edition, you actually get to see a couple of parents or 2 kids going to the same ship as the first one. You're sitting there going, this is no going to end well. In terms of continuity as well, I don't know if he still had the original sets, the original models, I don't know. But Cameron paid a lot of kind of attention to like the ship looks exactly the same. You're sitting there going, like, there's no doubt in your mind that this is the same planet. You get a wee brief cameo for Captain Hollister for Red Dwarf, basically kind of saying, it's fine, whatever they find, it's theirs kind of thing. And what they find is our good old friend, Mr. Facehugger. So as you can imagine, shit goes kind of pear-shaped. The parents are actually the parents of a young girl that they kind of come across a bit later on, a lady by the name of Rebecca Jordan, or as she's more commonly known as Newt, because nobody calls me Rebecca anymore, except my brother Timmy. They're dead, okay? But yeah, so played by wee Carrie Hen. But yeah, so that's effectively the backstory. So you kind of know something's kind of up before the lieutenant and everybody's kind of favourite character, Carter Burke, who works for the company but is really an okay guy. Whatever you say, buddy. Go to Ripley, who's gone, yeah, we lost contact with the kind of colony, and they're just like, and she's like, the fuck do you want me to do about it, kind of thing. And they're just like, come help us. And she's like, no, why would I? But then she's gone through kind of trauma. She thinks that, right, okay, if I go kind of help kind of finally kind of off these kind of creatures, then that'll be the end date kind of thing. I'll get my closure. Well, hey, unfortunately it doesn't end up that way, but anyway, so she finally agrees to go on the planet, and this time round, rather than just her being with like her crew, whatever, she's actually accompanied by a squad of ultimate badasses, or space marines, or the colonial marines as they're actually effectively kind of called. So you got a whole bunch of kind of like, ooh, we're tough, and you know we can totally kind of like kill anything, and I just need to know one thing, where they are. Like totally kind of machismo. Even like the ladies in the kind of group are just like, you know, oh yeah, we're totally kind of like, excuse me, badasses and kind of stuff like that. So you're thinking, oh, they might be fine. And Lisa, one of my favourite kind of bits with Bill Paxton. Bill Paxton's one of my favourite characters in it, and plays Hudson. But when it starts, Hudson is just this like, you know, don't worry, Ripley, me and my squad of ultimate badasses will protect you, which kind of completely coincides with later in the film where he's pissing his pants quite like almost every other kind of like second. But yeah, so you think she's got the backup, and well, you know, they go across, they come across not one, but many hits. So the title of this film is Aliens, and the original's Alien. So there's obviously more, and there's a shitload more kind of thing. So the Marines get their asses kicked, like absolutely kind of like wasted, which kind of basically kind of leads to the, well, you know, no, firepower isn't everything kind of thing. They find kind of Newt as well, and Newt is effectively like Ripley starts to kind of be like a mother figure to her and all the rest of it, and kind of takes care of her throughout the kind of film. She kind of bonds with like Hicks, the kind of person left in charge kind of thing, and then it turns out that the reason that all this shit happened is our good friend Carter Burke, the company guy who, the company bloke who's really an okay guy, sent the actual kind of like basically sent Newt's parents to die, because effectively he told them to go and check it out, and it turns out that, you know, like because obviously he was aware and he's like, oh, interesting, and he basically, you know, he wants the kind of cash kind of thing. And so that's his first kind of like, oh yeah, you aren't an okay guy, you're a scumbag. And then he also kind of traps Newt and Ripley in a kind of room with two facehuggers, with a kind of thinking behind that he will essentially have one or both of them impregnated with aliens, and then he can kind of take them home and kind of essentially get the payday out of it. So yeah, scumbag, absolute scumbag of the highest caliber. But there's always at least one. So yeah, shit happens after that. Then the aliens kind of get into the complex. There's a few other kind of deaths, and Newt is kind of effectively kind of taken away, effectively alien napped, and then Ripley goes to effectively get her, like effectively cementing her badass kind of state. I mean, she's fairly kind of badass in the first one, but in this one she's got like a pulse rifle strapped to like a flamethrower, and you know, she's got a whole bunch of grenades, and she goes down and like decides she's gonna like go and shoot herself some aliens so she can get Newt back. But then turns out that she's not the only mother in the picture, and we get to see the alien queen, which still to this day is probably one of the most impressive pieces of puppet work, puppet animatronic work ever. That thing is an absolute beast. It takes up like 3/4 of the set. It is so fucking cool. And it's just this kind of like, so all the other aliens, as I say, are around about 8-9 feet tall kind of thing. This thing is just, it's just huge, and it's busy laying alien eggs, and just like, yeah. So she's obviously a bit pissed. Is like, what are you doing in my house? And then Ripley's like, well, I'm trying to get my kind of daughter out of here. What's your problem? And then Ripley starts to kind of waste her kids, and Mummy's not too happy about that. So Mummy comes a running after her. They get in a wee bit of a confrontation in the lift, and Ripley's saved, and it's like, it's finally the finally over moment, which there's quite a few kind of bits in the actual franchise, but it's like, whew, everything's cool and everything. But it turns out that no, it's not cool. Mummy is coming along for the ride, and leads to a fairly kind of epic kind of showdown between the Alien Queen and Ripley in a power loader suit. And this thing again, so this was first released in 1986. I think the special edition was 1990. So like what have you, but the power loader versus the Alien Queen fight is just, it's like pretty awesome, and it still looked pretty good because it looks like it's all physical sets. Say what you want about Cameron these days, I think he is a teeny bit an egomaniac, but back in the day, Like he was definitely kind of quite ahead of his time. He wouldn't actually just settle for something that looked kind of fairly half-assed. So that scene is pretty awesome, with the exception of a couple of so like the film in general, absolutely kind of perfect, still looking like many years later back. There's a couple of kind of choppy composite bits where the ship flying towards stuff, and like the alien queen looking all weird stop motiony when it kind of goes bye and everything. But aside from that, like it still looks pretty awesome. So Ripley comes out, power loader suit, get away from her, you bitch, and they have a kind of fight. She wins the day, blows the alien out the airlock, shock and her horror, and it's wrapped up relatively nicely. Like Ripley's kind of got like the daughter figure, the daughter, like Newt's got the mother figure, and the two other survivors are just like, ah. And then we get across to the problematic Alien 3. So I think again they called the 2003 version the special edition. And again, I didn't really kind of notice too much difference. Biggest difference I think I remember in the special edition version as opposed to the theatrical cut was that the alien comes out of a bull or a cow or something like that. And yeah, it's fucking weird, and I don't know. So the biggest problem with Alien 3, I think a lot of people has it, is fairly disjointed. It kind of does it undoes a lot of kind of good work for the first two films, and it's almost noteworthy David Fincher's kind of name. So David Fincher directed this one. So in case you didn't, if you didn't realise for any reason, David Fincher directed Fight Club, Seven, Zodiac, Gone Girl. Like he's fairly consistent across the board. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo remake. So this was his kind of first kind of major kind of production, and as far as most of the actual kind of information goes, he had a shit time it. Apparently, according to I think a documentary, there's a bit where he goes, "I'm going to give some direction to you people, direct." And they're like, okay, cool. And as he walks off, apparently the producers who were actually on set almost the whole time were just like, "You're not doing any of that, leave that alone." And apparently that's how the entire production went. So thankfully this didn't completely dissuade David Fincher, because obviously if it did, we wouldn't have films like Fight Club and Seven and so on and so forth. So thank Christ this wasn't the kind of thing that he just went, you know what, I'm not even going to bother making films, screw that kind of thing. So I'm kind of glad that he decided to kind of stick with it. I don't think Alien 3 is as bad as everybody makes it out to be. It's the one I kind of remember the most when I was younger. I don't know if it's because I've seen it first. I don't think I've seen it first. The CG Alien, so 1992 computer generated alien, when it's kind of on the roof or like it's running and everything, awful fucking looking. It just doesn't look right at all. They obviously didn't kind of have a budget or like at least a special effects department to make it look good. And this film came out I think a couple of years after Terminator 2. So Terminator 2 was 1991 I think, and this came out in 92. So special effects had only come so far. Obviously the reason that Terminator 2 still works is because you got the kind of practical effects on top. So I think the thing I like the most about Alien 3, I like the setting. I like the fact that it's set in a prison colony. The alien's there with them. It's back to just the kind of one alien, and they're stuck in the they're basically stuck in the prison. No way out, no weapons, because it's a prison. These guys are not allowed to kind of walk about with shotguns and shit, because you know it could get kind of awkward. So I actually don't think it's anywhere near as bad as everybody makes it to be. It's no the best. It's probably actually by far the weakest at the franchise and the first four films, and possibly like the entire lot kind of thing. But I don't think it's anywhere near as bad as everybody kind of remembers it being. There's certain elements, as I say, I like most of the cast are fairly top notch. I think there's a sizable chunky kind of English actors. You've got Charles Dance in there. And some it doesn't make an awful lot of sense. It's a bit shit that they effectively they kill off Newt, Hicks and kind of Bishop pretty much within seconds of this one. It's like, what the hell? But as far as I'm led to believe as well, for everything I've kind of read about the third one as well, is this kind of had quite a troubled production to begin with. gone through numerous kind of rewrites and what have you. One of the kind of concepts was that it was going to be set on a wooden planet with a bunch of monks, which sounds pretty interesting, but obviously it got kind of sidelined for the kind of prison thing. I think some of the elements for all the kind of scripts eventually kind of made it in this one, but all in all, it's fairly kind of hodgepodgey. Biggest kind of thing with this one is I think it was supposed to kind of wrap up the franchise, or at least for the standpoint of kind of having Ellen Ripley in it, because turns out that she's kind of got a little visitor provided by our good friend here, but it's actually a kind of queen, so obviously the big kind of evil corporation company and everything is just like, we would like that, please, can we have that? Like, yeah, we totally want that for our bioweapons division. And she's like, nah, no happening, kind of thing. So yeah, loads of deaths involved. This one's actually, I think, a lot gorier than the other ones, which is weird to say, especially considering the entire first 4 films are an 18, but like I think most of the things you get to see, we close up to like the alien going with the kind of second move and what have you, and obviously the chest burster scene as well is fairly kind of gruesome. But there's a bit in this one where a boy gets kind of like thrown into a fan. There's like loads of kind of bits where, like, you know, people are kind of essentially mauled and blood splatters everywhere and what have you, kind of thing. I think probably the best thing they could have done with this one is, because obviously like Ripley's kind of carrying the Queen, I think the best thing for this would have been if they'd actually kind of played it as if the alien was trying to protect her the whole time. I think that would have been an interesting idea. Like if basically the reason it was offering all these prisoners is like, I didn't want you anywhere near like her, and that would have at least kind of, it would have been kind of like an intriguing kind of thing to do with the alien. But of course the studio interference and everything, despite the fact it's a David Fincher film, it doesn't feel very Fincher-esque. Like if you watch a lot of his kind of stuff later on, you know he's got his signature style, you know, like he's quite a perfectionist and what have you. And so the studio finally did actually kind of like cut the umbilical, because 20th Century Fox done this, but they also done Fight Club, and so they definitely kind of let him off the leash for Fight Club, because that's a film they probably wouldn't have let him make like 8 years before. So it's quite that's quite interesting. I'm assuming that Alien 3 was definitely a commercial success, otherwise they wouldn't have kind of made the 4th one. But yeah, so for the most part, definitely weakest. It ends with Ripley dying. I mean, it looks fairly final. She gets kind of properly cremated and everything, but then it leads on to Alien Resurrection, which is set 200 years after the events of Alien 3. So a lot of time's passed. And so Ripley's back in this one because she's effectively cloned by like a United Systems military, effectively. So the army's kind of like now like, okay, here we go. And so she's effectively cloned so they can get the alien out of her and start making kind of wee alien babies. And just obviously to make the cash, because they're all about the cash still. So funnily enough, it doesn't go well. It goes in completely and utterly pear-shaped, but all her kind of resurrection, well, hey, also kind of couples with the fact that, or coincides with the arrival, effectively a pirate crew who supply the bodies for alien egg implantation, which is kind of great. Imagine waking up to that shit. You're just like, oh, man, I really need to get myself a drink of water, have a coffee, whatever. What's that in front of me? Oh, okay, you know, that'd be a shit way to wake up. But yeah, so go inside. So effectively a pirate crew, merc crew or whatever, crew of the Betty, which is like this kind of dysfunctional kind of groupie kind of, what's the best way to describe them? Like just ne'er-do-wells. Yes, I'm gonna get kind of posh about it. Two of the crew members played by Winona Ryder and the ever fantastic Ron Perlman, which is one of the reasons that I actually really enjoy the film. A lot of kind of people don't like 4. I actually quite like 4, and it is mostly for the back and forth. This script's written by Joss Whedon, so it doesn't quite feel like a Joss Whedon film, in that a lot of the kind of dialogue you could imagine, like, for example, if they kind of gave it to somebody like Malcolm Reynolds, or if Joss Whedon was in fact directing this, you could imagine there's a lot of kind of things whereby you might have got them to deliver it a wee bit differently. So some of the stuff kind of comes off a wee bit like, huh, okay then. But I mean, all in all, very enjoyable. Ripley's effectively a weird human alien hybrid thing. She's got a wee bit of acid for blood kind of thing, and she's pretty strong. Gets hit in the face at one point by like a barbell. It's a barbell, like the, obviously I don't work out, in case you didn't kind of realise, but yeah, but she's pretty kind of badass in this one, or maybe not so much, not so much super bad, like more badass than the rest, but she's pretty badass. She has, however, got a weird, sexy thing going on with the aliens in this one. It's just like, she likes to touch faces with like weird kind of fingers, and there's like a scene whereby like one of the aliens is carrying her off and she's kind of stroking it, and you're just like, what the fuck is going on here? It's very kind of strange. Some of the set pieces are still pretty cool. Some of the CG's not as good, but it's way better than it was back in '92, because they only use it sparingly, thankfully. This was actually, I think, just before films like The Matrix, so it came out a couple of years before, so they were starting to kind of get the CG a wee bit better. Set piece where they swim under the kitchen kind of thing, and there's a couple of aliens there leading them up to this kind of big ladder bit and everything. That whole kind of sequence is really cool. Just trying to think, the fairly contentious hybrid as well, I'll get to in a wee second. I'm just trying to think of other kind of bits that I actually quite like. I do think most of the dialogue for Sigourney Weaver in this is pretty cool. There's a bit where they come across one of the crew members that's been implanted by the alien egg, played by Leland Orser, who is one of these guys, you see him, you never remember his name until you see him, you're just like, oh, it's that guy for that thing. So he was in what's it called, Seven. So the guy that kind of is essentially kind of coerced into the lust kind of murder, and like he's got the thing strapped to himself and everything. You know the scene I'm talking about and everything. It's that guy. So the guy, whenever you see him, you're just like, oh, it's that guy for that thing. But if you ever need to kind of know his name again, it's Leland Orser. So yeah, so he's the one that's got the alien. There's a bit where like they're all talking back and forth, like, we're not taking this boy with us, like I'm not having anything like any of that birthing near my ass and stuff like that. And so the whole time he's like, what's inside me kind of thing, and like they're just still talking over him and just ignoring him. He's like, what's in fucking inside me? And at least his Sigourney Weaver just going, these humans hijacked your hijacked your ship, and this guy put an alien inside you, real nasty one too, and in about a few hours it's gonna burst its way through your ribcage and you're gonna die. And she's like, any questions? And he's like, who are you? He's like, I'm the monster's mother. And there's just this whole kind of like, okay then. So yeah, so it's fairly ensemble-y. It's very kind of nicely shot. It's directed by Jean-Pierre Jeunet, so the guy that directed Amelie. So it's, weirdly enough, like most of these, like all these kind of films actually have a fairly high-profile director slapped to attach to them. I think with the exception of the Alien vs Predator films, but the less said about them, the better. So yeah, most people didn't rate it. I really enjoy Alien Resurrection. Some of it's a bit cheesy, some of it's a bit like doesn't really kind of hold up that well, but again, in general, I like it. Which then leads me to the prequels, which I have a weird kind of love-hate relationship with the prequels. So Prometheus and Alien Covenant. My biggest kind of issue with them right at the gate is I don't think they were even remotely needed. There's this inherent trend in Hollywood whereby like they claim that it's like, oh, we'll give them the backstory because they've never had the backstory before. Like playing to that kind of area, like, well, people really want to know how the aliens first came like into being. People really want to kind of know what happened at the Norwegian camp and the thing and stuff like that. No, we fucking don't. the amount of kind of times that this is essentially kind of tacked on as a plot hole and what have you, especially in this day and age as well, right? My favourite thing about the original Alien film, which is why sometimes I choose to kind of almost disregard the prequels as something completely separate, but my biggest my biggest love of the original Alien film is when they go into that ship and they come across the space jockey and they come across the alien and all the rest of it, is that you have no fucking idea how they got there, no clue whatsoever. And that's the best thing about it, because that whole theory of the unknown is the best thing about, like, because two things: one, it's creepier that way, and two, you can paint as much, like, you can try and fill in the blanks yourself, which there's so much trends in kind of films these days within reason, but there's so much a trend to try and explain everything. And some kind of filmmakers will deliberately not explain everything, so sometimes you get like complete and utter hiding of the information entirely. So you're like, but then again, almost to leave your own interpretation, but at the same time, also for you to actually kind of go, okay, did they mean to do that, or was it kind of, it's deliberately kind of not explained to make it kind of seem interesting, or are they just like, oh fuck, we didn't know how to explain this, we'll just leave it. But in the original Alien film, that whole scene where they go into the ship, and as I say, you see the space jockey and the kind of and the chair with the burst out chest and everything, and obviously you know something's kind of went awry. And as I said, you find all the alien eggs. The whole thing, the atmosphere is so kind of well done when you have no fucking idea, no clue what the hell's kind of like happened there, and that's what I love about the original kind of film. I still love it. When I watch it, I'm still kind of the mind. I kind of put the prequels to the back of my mind, because I still love the first time I kind of watched it. Still, the when I think about it and everything, I still love that kind of, oh, what the hell's going on? Why is all this stuff here? What's more, like, I don't need some Hollywood exec sitting in their kind of wee chair and thinking that they can spoon feed this to me, like, because no, and just kind of as a wee segue, specifically with the Thing prequel, I love the 1982 John Carpenter The Thing. I don't think I'm alone in this. It's actually like one of the best kind of sci-fi horror films of all time. I'll fight anybody to the death that decides otherwise. And I watched the 2011 prequel. I thought it was alright for its own film, but again, my biggest issue was it's like, we need to try and explain what happened at the Norwegian camp. So in the original, they go to this kind of like this other camp when shit starts to go pear-shaped to try and figure out what the hell happened, and they find so many kind of people dead. They find like partially kind of mutated kind of people, and people that have kind of like killed themselves, and all of this kind of stuff that's kind of happened. And again, the best thing about it is the fear of the unknown, because you're sitting there going, you're in the position that they're in, which is probably the best way to explain it, because they're sitting there going, what the hell's going on? And you're the same. You're not sitting there going, well, don't worry, I watched the 2011 prequel, I know everything that's went on. You've no fucking clue. Now, thankfully, getting back to it, with Prometheus and Alien Covenant, there is a wee bit of an identity crisis, and I think the thinking behind it when they first started kind of writing Prometheus and what have you is that, so there's a lot of schools of thoughts on this, and I'd actually quite like to see like if like a behind the scenes as to kind of what happened. But there was basically like, oh, it's set in the same universe, but it's no Alien. But then there's so many elements from Alien in it, so you think, right, okay, well, they're trying to tie it into the first one, but then like stuff doesn't quite kind of go that way or whatever. Anyway, so in this, so in Prometheus, which, don't get me wrong, I actually quite like the prequels. It's their own separate thing. It's, as I say, it's a bit of a weird thing, but in the original, so in Prometheus, it turns out that a couple of kind of scientists have discovered like evidence that their creators were living amongst them whilst they were when they were kind of like fledgling civilization, and that the creators that lived among them were actually kind of what they would kind of describe as their gods kind of thing. But it turns out that they're effectively kind of they're aliens kind of thing, as they refer to as the engineers, or the space jockey is the kind of name that was so kind of affectionately kind of used in the first film. So they set out to go and find them because, you know, mankind's curious and what have you. And then they kind of find the planet that they've kind of been told to kind of like visit and what have you. And then stuff goes pear-shaped. Turns out that the place they visit isn't like this kind of this Garden of Eden kind of thing at all. It's effectively a bioweapons facility is the best way to describe it, in that there's a lot of shit in there that shouldn't be there, but it's kind of effectively used to kind of create and kind of destroy life effectively. So they obviously get a wee bit disenfranchised with the whole thing and like, what the hell? And there is some fairly kind of creepy moments. What's really weird about this film is, so this film's a 15, and I'll get to the kind of rating. So like every kind of original film in the original first 4 are all 18s. I get why the first one is like for violence. Some of the other ones I'm not too sure. I think maybe the second one was for swearing, stuff like that. But I think maybe Alien has actually been reclassified since, which I didn't like. You know, okay, fair enough. Like, you know, we're not as sensitive as we used to be. I remember that Terminator was an 18 back in the day as well. But these are both 15, so there's some fairly kind of like graphic kind of violence in it, but there's also there's a weird lack of swearing in this. So I think the first time you ever hear like the F-bomb being dropped in, I'm not going to be shy, the word fuck is dropped. It's kind of cut off by a transmission. Like a transmission glitch, and you're just like, this isn't supposed to be a 12A, but I think there was rumours surrounding that it was going to be a 12A back when they were talking about releasing it, so people were just like, no, what the hell? That's a thing that really kind of winds me up as well. Previous kind of films in a franchise either being a 15 or an 18, and them deciding, oh, we'll make them a 12, like Taken 1 is an 18 for graphic kind of like graphic content, what have you, and then the second one they were just like 12A. And obviously the thinking behind this is we want to make more money. If we can get kids in to see the film, we've got more bums on seats, we can make more money. But then just the sacrifices, like the actual kind of film and like the integrity of the director and what have you, you're just like, no. And so Prometheus, if you're going to do an Alien prequel or a film set in the Alien universe, doesn't it need to be a 12 fucking A or like a 12 or a PG-13 as they would call it in the States? No. So yeah, some of the choices are a bit weird. The violence is there, but there is a lot. It seems to be kind of almost backtracked, or like maybe just kind of like just held back enough, so it gets its like 15 certificate. I almost wonder if this was actually a PG-13 in the States. And like maybe need to kind of look it up to find out whether or not it was an R rating or no. I'd look up on my phone, but I'm using that to kind of film myself. So yeah, there's a couple of elements that I didn't understand the thinking behind it. But yeah, so for the most part, I like Prometheus. I like Noomi Rapace is really good in it. Michael Fassbender, as always, is absolutely fantastic as David. Probably the best thing in the two prequel films. Just like his kind of unsettling, cold, detached kind of performance is really kind of like just really unsettling to kind of watch. I really do like Michael Fassbender in this one. It had a look to live up to, I think, was the problem. The two prequels are actually directed by Ridley Scott, which does mean one thing: the production value is absolutely fantastic. Like the way everything looks, the fact that there's quite clearly a lot of practical sets, despite the fact that a lot of quite a bit of CG. The CG itself looks absolutely phenomenal. Like the spaceship and everything looks really cool. The alien creatures, everything looks pretty kind of damn awesome. So there's definitely that gone from, because he's such a high profile and well known director. They're quite happy to go make it rain and it's fine. We'll kind of get we'll get you back when you kind of make us a shitload of money kind of thing. So there's definitely that gone for it. As I say, it's got some solid performances. I actually, as I say, I quite like them. The Prometheus is quite kind of unsettling. Some of the creatures that are in it is fine, despite the fact that some of the characters are pretty fucking stupid. Which is, I'm not the only one to think that, but the stupidity seems to kind of go into Covenant as well. But there's a scene, everybody knows it in Prometheus, whereby the biologist, so the scientist kind of, who is specifically there to kind of like look at biology and what have you, and actually be like take things in a scientific manner or what have you, and played by Rafe Spall, who I really like. But it's so unbelievably stupid. So he comes across this kind of weird snake creature, and he's like, "Hello, baby," and he's calling it baby and stuff like that, and he's like try to touch it, and funnily enough, it gets really annoyed about that, and he kind of goes fairly horrifically, and then the other boy who's kind of with him along for the ride ends up getting sacrificed as well, and you're kind of like, it's a bit of shit that he kind of ends up getting off, because like he's just there to try and help, and yeah, like his death's fairly horrific as well. Like he gets a wee bit of acid sprayed on his kind of helmet and it melts in, which is pretty fucking cool, but also kind of like kind of thing. So as weird as I say, is if this is a PG-13 in the States, they definitely skirted a lot, unless there's a different cut that exists. I don't know if there is or no. So there's that. There's other things like when they come across one of the engineers' kind of heads, they start poking and prodding it. This thing's been preserved for like 2,000 or 200 years or what? I think it's 2,000 years, and they're just like, oh my god, let's get to the lab and start to go and poking it, and then it goes kind of thing without proper quarantine kind of process. That's a lot of that's a fairly kind of common thing in this as well. Quarantine processes, I think in general in the entire franchise, are kind of like, it's fine, but in this day and age, like, quarantine is probably no big joke, self-isolation, what have you. So you're just kind of sitting there going, well, if I've got to isolate because of corona, I'd definitely be doing it in this fucking situation, kind of thing. Although one of these things, it's like, I made the joke about Silent Hill, that, and the fact that if you ever got trapped there, I wouldn't kind of go along. It's the same deal. So if somebody's like, do you want to come to an alien planet to like go and poke some alien eggs? I'd be like, no, you're fucking alright, pal. I'm gonna go back to bed, but thanks for the invite. I'll see you in the obituaries. I don't have I think I kind of mispronounced that like a spaz, but anywho. Yeah, so Prometheus, shit happens, but then despite the fact that having some kind of fairly kind of obvious alien elements, there's the space jockey kind of ship and what have you, and the engineers are actually like the space jockey and what have you, which is one of the worst kept secrets ever. It doesn't directly tie into Alien, which is just like, what? You get some alien kind of creature elements, like there's a big giant face hugger that kind of appears, and one of the engineers gives birth to what they call, I think they called the Deacon alien, which is this kind of this thing that kind of looks a bit like an alien. It's got like the long kind of head, and the kind of mouth kind of pops it a wee bit, but again, it just seems like it was a like kind of slapped in at the last second to kind of make you like aware that it was actually tied in. So Prometheus definitely suffers from an identity crisis. Part of me kind of wishes they had just decided to go along the routes of it's set in the same universe, but it's not 100% tied in. It would have been fine to still have the space jockey elements and what have you kind of like appear in it, but at the same time, no actually trying directly tie it to Alien. I think that would have made a much better film. And that's again where the follow-up Covenant kind of falls flat as well, that it's still trying to kind of tie it into that universe. Again, elements I kind of liked in Covenant as well. So there is so Michael Fassbender's back playing Joe Rolls as both Walter and David. Fantastic as always. I find it really kind of hard to fault Michael Fassbender, because everything I've ever kind of seen him in, he's actually been fantastic in. You've got a new kind of crew, dumbasses, and I say that because they go down to an alien planet they've never kind of seen before, and at no point observe quarantine or safety protocols. They're all walking about with fucking helmets on, despite the fact they're being kind of an alien planet. Like, fair enough, the air might be breathable, but you don't know what other elements in the kind of atmosphere shouldn't be being breathed in, and that obviously comes into play relatively kind of early on, whereby there's a couple of these fungus pod things that a couple of them kind of breathe in, or like basically kind of elements of the dust that end up in the body, and like shit gets fucked up, and it's just like, really like, now, fair enough. Now, to be fair to these guys are colonists. So for the most part, they're no really kind of scientists. They're there basically to kind of colonize, like they're on their way to kind of colonize this kind of new planet and what have you. So you're kind of like, okay, fine, I'll kind of grant you some of your leeways, but at the same time as well, if it was me, and much like the same at the moment, I'd be wearing a fucking mask. In fact, actually, if it was me, I'd be on that kind of planet in a full-on hazmat suit. And I'd also be taking a bazooka. But that's the other thing as well. I would never kind of come to the planet in the first place. They're like, oh, we're going to colonize a far planet. Have fun with that. If it works, set up the Stargate and I'll come through that kind of thing. But it's just... So it's almost dumb decision after dumb decision. So again, a couple of people are like, ooh, what's this? Poke, poke, bleh. Dust. And then like they end up kind of giving birth to almost proto-alien kind of deals. Fairly horrific scene in the kind of ship whereby they take one of the boys back and like stuff starts erupting, fades back. This one, I think, of the prequels, in fact, actually for a while, this is probably one of the most gory ones. There's bit with shit exploding through people's back, blood and gore and bits and chunks everywhere. But the biggest problem I've got with that whole fact that they bring him on the ship is he shouldn't be on the fucking ship in the first place. So as Ellen kind of said, as Ripley said in the very first kind of like film, when they try and bring Kane back on board, it's like, no, he shouldn't be allowed back on board because he's gonna he could infect us all. And they bring this guy in. He's cool. Like this is just after he spews up blood as well. And surely it's like, we're familiar with Ebola because Ebola is actually kind of mentioned in the previous film, and that's a fairly infectious disease. And this boy's on an alien planet and he just started coughing up blood. It's cool. Let's bring him back on the ship and start poking and prodding him and shit. And they do, and it goes fucking pear-shaped. So that's dumbass decision number one. So the biggest kind of annoyance for me. The second is at the beginning of the film, Billy Crudup's character Orm is essentially put in charge because James Franco gets flash fried in his kind of pod. Probably the quickest cameo for James Franco in a film ever, kind of thing. But yeah, he gets deep fried, crispied, and so he's now in charge. He's obviously no up to kind of spec. People didn't really kind of trust him. There's no awful kind of big dissension in the ranks, but also there's this kind of like, you don't really know what you're up to, pal. And he does. He's out of his depth. He suffers the kind of loss of his wife as well, and it kind of almost glosses over that. Like he's like, there's a lot of bits where he's distraught and what have you, but he tries to keep it together as best he can, which is, I think in that situation kind of makes sense. He's still trying to kind of come into the role of being the leader kind of thing, but he makes the dumbest fucking decision I think in the entire kind of like the entire film, almost the entire franchise, whereby he comes across David. So David rescues him on the planet. He's been there the whole time, kind of thing, and he comes across David, who is essentially trying to have a chat with one of these kind of fully grown alien creatures, and he's just like almost ready to kind of get a wee hug and like maybe more kind of thing. And Orm's like, move it the way, because what the hell, you shouldn't be kind of in that thing just kind of butchered a whole bunch of people I know. So no. And so Orm shoots it, David gets pissed off, and David then kind of turns around after that whole thing. He's like, come with me. Now if it was me, I'd be like, no, I'm not going to do that. I am not in the mood. Thank you very much for your hospitality, but we got to get going. But no, Orm follows him, and he follows him to effectively a room where it turns out that David's been pissing about with genetic engineering, and effectively he's the one that effectively has developed the alien that we all kind of effectively know and fear. And he gets Orm to essentially come into a room with a bunch of alien eggs. Again, red flags should be flagging up everywhere. Didn't he do this kind of thing? But Orm's like, la, 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 la. Despite the fact that what he just witnessed, and he's went into a room with all this kind of weird kind of zoology and shit going on, and he's just like, whatever, I'm fine with that. And so he goes into a room, alien eggs and what have you. One opens up. Now again, horror survival kind of like 101, something like that happens, you go the other fucking way. You leave, you've had enough. No happening. But no, he decides he's gonna go, oh, okay. And David's like, have a look inside. And he's like, all right then. And he does. And funnily enough, guess what? Our good friend is in there. And of course, as I'm sure you kind of know, it doesn't kind of go well for Orm at all. Where Alien gone, being weird and standing and stuff like. I think this is one of the things that my friend Ant really hates about Covenant, and I kind of agree with him on this one. This one's a bit weird. So in the original film, when the chestburster pops out and everything, it has a look at its surroundings and then it gets the fuck right out of there. It's like, no, survival instinct, I'm off kind of thing. But for some reason in this one, when it pops out, not only does it kind of like stand upright, it doesn't look like. So again, the chestburster in the original one is almost slug-like, slug snake-like kind of thing. It's got a couple of wee kind of appendages, but then when it runs off, it's kind of like it's got a long tail kind of thing. This is almost like a teeny tiny baby xenomorph, and it just kind of stands upright, and it kind of like has its wee alien hands sticking up, and you're just like, what now? What? Weird. But yeah, funnily enough, it ends up, or one of them ends up back on their big ship, and they have to blow out an airlock, shock horror kind of thing. So probably it has its flaws. I just kind of sat through it just now. I enjoyed watching it kind of thing. Again, Fassbender on top form. Catherine Watterson, I think her name is. So the last was in Fantastic Beasts and Inherent Vice, is like the Ripley character in this one. Danny McBride's in it as well, which is kind of really, it's always interesting to see him when he's not actually doing a comedy role. I actually think he's quite decent in this as well. So yeah, for the most part, prequels didn't need to exist. They're enjoyable in their own right. Because both of them again are directed by Ridley Scott, they've got a lot of money behind them, because Ridley Scott, I think, is one of these guys like Chris Nolan. I reckon when Chris Nolan's like, I'd like to make a film, like the studio's like, how much money would you like? No, we're going to give you this money. It's like, how much money would you like? I think the same goes for Ridley Scott. So again, production value is off the charts in Covenant as well. I think my biggest problem with Covenant, more than anything, is that it's effectively kind of halted Neil Blomkamp's effectively the requel he was going to do. So he was in talks to do a sequel to Aliens that effectively disregarded 3 and 4. And I don't know how much I like that trend at the moment. It's kind of, it works for some. Like, I actually quite like how Halloween 2018 kind of ended up, but for this one I was a wee bit kind of like, But at the same time, I'm also like Neil Blomkamp, who directed District 9, Elysium, and Chappie. I think Chappie was fairly divisive. Also, he's kind of directed a few kind of like fairly fantastic shorts on his thing called Oat Studio. Zygote being a particular kind of high note there. So I was very like, yes, please let him kind of direct an Alien. But then it's kind of like Ridley Scott like took his ball back. Like, you know, he was like, I'm going to make several Alien films, and basically what that does is it effectively shelved Blomkamp's version. But at the same time, I don't think that there's going to be any more after Covenant, or if there is, it's going to have to be like seriously kind of thought, because obviously Disney kind of own Fox now, and which means the Alien Queen effectively a Disney princess or a Disney queen, which is really kind of interesting. But yeah, so I don't know what state the franchise is in at the moment, whether or not we're going to get any other kind of films, whether or not Ridley Scott's going to direct any, or I really kind of hope he doesn't try and get his kind of son to direct anything, because his son directed, was it Morgan? Weird kind of film with Anya Taylor-Joy, whereby she's like a weird genetic creation thing, and it's like, nah, what? Anyway, so just to wrap up, if we're going ranking wise, Alien 1 and 2, high tier. In the original franchise, it goes 4 and then 3. And I quite like the prequels, despite the fact, as I said, for the most part, Prometheus suffers from a huge identity crisis, not really knowing what it needs to do. And I think Covenant is maybe too much an Alien film for its own good. And again, suffers for some bits and bobs. There is fantastic elements in both the prequels, mainly, as I say, production value, some of the performances, the creature design. In general, I actually do enjoy watching them. I don't think they're bad films at all. I just think they're fairly out of place in the kind of Alien universe. So yeah, that was me ranting about Alien for over an hour. But again, I was talking about the whole franchise, so hopefully you found that relatively interesting. I hope to talk to you guys again soon, so I'll wave goodbye. Facehugger will wave goodbye. Bye. Try not to make any stupid decisions whereby you start poking stuff on alien planets. It's not a good thing, never ends well. And it was good to talk to you guys. Guys, people, individuals.